Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday Live for this week. We've got some fun stuff to talk about. I do want to just posit that I come to you from the House of Whiners this week, a house of whining dogs. That's all I'm hearing in the background. Don't know why. They're not usually whiners, but there's a lot of talking going on in my living room right now and complaining. So obviously something is wrong. But they're just going to have to deal with it. And speaking of dogs, we've got Joel Ryals on today from Fortress Canine, whose dogs probably never whine. And we've got John Willis, of course, as usual. Guys, what has been like new on your mind this week? Let's go around the horn on that one first.
Sure. Well, what's funny is I've been getting a little bit more into doing these motivational talks. John keeps kicking my ass about doing more content. So every evening I've been doing these little motivational talks and trying to listen to guys to get ideas for things to talk about. And I've been really into Jordan Peterson's stuff these last couple of weeks. He's got some good things. And that's one of the things that actually drew me into the dog world in the first place. Is the first guy that I learned under had a very philosophical approach to everything. And it's been one of those things that's nice to tie back in to kind of what we do with the dogs.
Awesome. John, what about you? What's been on your mind this week?
Winter's coming. No matter how you look at it, this year is 3/4 gone. What do you have to show for it? What are you going to show for it? And what did you do with it? Because it's never coming back. I actually walked out this morning and it was cold. I actually put pants on last night for the first time, literally since it stopped having ice here in, I don't know, January, February. So,
yeah,
I'll send some of that cold weather down our way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at a point now here where we make a weekly list of getting ready for winter, and until that list is done, we don't make a new one. So it's been a fun little thinking about all the cold things when it's not cold. But this morning, John was right on. It was nice out, actually. It was kind of nice and cold. It was not, oh no, we just went over the line of too cold.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Get ready. I mean, they keep squealing. Winter is coming. Winter's coming. Be prepared. But there'll be a ton of people that aren't. And I think it like people are like, what do you like? You and I had talked about the railway, right? And I keep seeing that, but I don't know anything of it. And I know guys that work for the railway that haven't really said anything about it. Mm-hmm. So everybody's like, what are you going to do extra? Why don't you just do what you do and just keep doing what you do, right? Why don't you have firewood? Why do we have to get, like, if I'm cutting firewood right now, it's for 2 years from now.
Yeah. Well, it's like Jack was saying when the Kufis stuff started up, was why are all you guys freaking out? Like, I've been talking about this for, 12 years at the time. Like, if you guys have been doing what I told you to do all along, this shouldn't be that big a deal. Everybody relax. Same thing with peppers. Yeah, when we were up in Alaska, it was a month-long process to get everything ready for the first ice, and we usually had snow on the ground by Halloween. The end of October was usually snow sticking.
Did you live in Alaska?
Yeah, I was there for about 6 years. I got assigned there with the military and finished up my military time up there, and then had I tried to do the civilian side up there, and it's like when you're paying $1,900 a month for a rental house and $1,100 a month averaged out over the year for your heating bill, it's pretty expensive when you're not getting that extra pay from the military for being up there.
Did you love it there?
I did. If I could afford it, I would have stayed up there. But surprisingly, during that year that I was there doing the civilian side, I actually was working with a real estate company. I started selling dogs again. Like, people just started contacting me about the dogs and selling dogs. And I really looked at it from an airline perspective and said, okay, if I'm going to travel to them or if they're going to travel to me, $1,200 for a round trip ticket is pretty cost prohibitive. Whereas if I live in the lower 48, pretty much anywhere, I can do that for half the cost. And now we're at a point where we pretty much don't travel unless it's coming to events like what you guys have. And my clients just come to me and I tell them, I'll come to you if you want me to, but it's really expensive because I have to pay people to watch my dogs here, run the kennel, all that kind of stuff. And the really wealthy clients are like, no problem, I'll pay it. But most people just come here and train with us here on our location now.
I feel like you could stay full-time busy with those really wealthy clients.
I probably could. What I'm actually trying to do is get a guy. I've got a couple guys, young guys working with me now. Just wanted to learn how we did things. And I just said, come on in and train with us. They were like, how much does it cost? And I'm like, it costs you getting chewed on by my dogs. That's what it costs. You get in the bite suit and you're going to get chewed on, and my dogs are going to benefit and I'm going to benefit, and you'll learn while you're doing it. And, but I'd like to get one of these guys trained up to actually go do all those follow-on trainings and the deliveries, because they could make, $7,000 a month doing that kind of stuff, just doing a couple deliveries a month, and have half the month off essentially. And then, traveling around, enjoying themselves. When I take my wife with me, she's like, are you serious that like this is how you can make money? Like we're hanging out with people in like marble mansions and things like that. And they're like, stay in our house. Here's our guest house over here. You guys can stay there. Finish training for the day. And we're just hanging out, walking around on the golf course or doing whatever. And I'm like, hard to believe you can make a living just hanging out with wealthy people.
And people could clean up right now with a minivan or a Sprinter van, just ping ponging back across the United States delivering puppies.
Mm-hmm.
We just had one drop. We just had a female brought in from North Carolina, and a dude showed up in a minivan, and he had 10 other dogs. We had a guy here with a Sprinter van that had 20 dogs on board a couple of years ago, and man, they're set up. And that dude just boom, 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 boom.
That's actually one of our biggest things to figure out is transportation. So when everything started up in January 2020 with the lockdowns and all that, the airlines pretty much stopped shipping live animals, which was how we did most of our transport. So at this point, most of our clients fly into a local airport, and they either I'll meet them at the airport, but a lot of them are like, no, I want to come see the facility. So they rent a car and come out here and hang out with us for a couple hours and then fly back home. But the few that are like, I can't fly there, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, here's a couple numbers of some pet transporters that guys have used in the past, but I haven't had any that are regular enough that I can actually recommend them. So I always have to kind of give them the disclaimer of, once I hand this dog off, it's between you and them. I'm no longer responsible.
Yeah. Yep.
That totally makes sense. Okay, well, we were chatting a little bit before we started, and you were starting to explain what you plan to do with your dogs when we see you in only 2 weeks.
Crazy. Yes. Well, yeah, that's coming up on us. Like we have to get the RV reset and get all loaded up. And after class this weekend, we got to break down half our obstacle courses so we can load that into the RV. But so some of the stuff, it'll depend a little bit about what we have available when we get there, John, but we've been prepping up for vehicle deployments. So if you have an older vehicle you don't mind dogs jumping in and out of and possibly scratching up the seats because they get pretty ramped up when they're fighting in there. But we've been doing multiple dog deployments. So we're going to be, we have multiple pairs of dogs that we can deploy together and show people the capabilities of, the difference between one dog versus multiple dogs. If we have a couple platforms, I think I messaged you about it. Just wanted to make sure we have a couple platforms, and I'll break down the rope obstacle that we have and just bring the come-alongs and the ropes and the anchor points. And then we can hook them up to a tree, or we can even sink fence posts in the ground is how I currently have it set up. But the tighter we can get it, the better. And we'll have the tight ropes. We'll have a ladder. If you have extendable ladders and things like that, we can be doing the ladder rope or the ladder crosses. We're going to have some of our beams. So we're going to have a pretty good basic agility course set up. If people want to jump in and try and handle a dog while we're doing some of the obedience demos, they can come in and kind of practice taking some of our dogs through some of the obstacles. We're going to be doing single dog deployments, multi-dog deployments, attack on handler scenarios where you're just moving around and there's a surprise attack, for instance, going through a parking lot or something like that. And you get sneak attacked there. Again, the vehicles, and then just doing multiple. Oh, we got multiple attacker scenarios set up too, where there's a bad guy. You send your dogs on the bad guy, and then one of his buddies that was hiding comes in, attacks the handler while the dogs are off already fighting somebody else. So we've been running through a bunch of those different scenarios, and that's the kind of stuff that we have planned when we get there.
Wow, that's awesome. Like a lot of fun stuff. What'd you say, John?
I said, that sounds awesome.
Yep.
And then if people want to sign our very extensive waiver that says, yes, you know, you could die right now, and you're accepting 100% responsibility for yourself. We'll give some people the opportunity to get in the bite suit too.
That's cool. So if you were your wife was at Walmart with a dog,
yep,
heading into Walmart, and I went out and said, surprise, and like attacked you, would the dog defend without you giving command?
Yeah. So an actual attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do a lot of what we call stability training with the dogs, which is when not to attack. Right. So because people do stupid things when you're in public, I've literally had people try to agitate my dogs in public. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? You're about to get bit, you idiot. But, you know, I tell my dogs, leave it. And they're just like, okay, this guy's just being an idiot. So the key kind of switch for our dogs is if somebody goes hands on with you, then they engage. And so I tell my clients, if you have friends or family or anything like that like to come over and roughhouse, you need to put your dogs away before they get there. Because it's not fair to the dog to place them in multiple different situations. Now, I get my dogs used to kind of roughhousing with my kids, but even that's a process when they're new to the the overall bite work situation, right? So, they're laying in the living room, and we'll kind of, get on the floor, and we'll start just slowly kind of moving around and wrestling in slow motion kind of, and telling the dog, it's okay, I see it, leave it alone. Because, they kind of look and going, what's going on? Like, do I need to go over and do something about that? And so you have to communicate with them until they get used to, you and your kids wrestle around on the floor and that's no big deal. Or, your kid and their friends wrestle around and that's no big deal. But when you're doing those intros to those situations, you got to bring the dog out in those environments, make the situation safe, right? So we create the situation, we control the situation so it's safe, and then we correct as needed. And so Jack helped me come up with those triple C's. And then ultimately that conditions the dog that these situations are okay and these situations are not okay. But in general public movement, if somebody puts their hands on you, that's when the dogs attack. So we'll probably actually run some of those situations more as the drills that we do, where we do a stabilization exercise where the dogs are told to leave it alone. And I'm in a suit and I'm moving around. So the suit itself kind of tells the dogs, hey, it's time to spar, right? And they know, we might be in a fight here. And they're told to leave it alone. And I move around. I give the handler a big hug. We shake hands and kind of pat him on the shoulder. How's it going, man? And the dogs know, okay, all that's friendly interaction. There's no big deal there. And then as we're moving around, at some time, usually the handler doesn't even know this is going to happen because it's much more effective when they don't know it's going to happen because they're in a relaxed state, right? And then I'll just, like, a lot of times I'm walking around them. So I wait till I'm behind the handler and then I attack the handler. And the minute I attack the handler, the dog's like, nope, now you've gone too far. And then they engage. So there's a lot of that type of training that goes into the family protection and above dogs that, it teaches the dogs, nobody puts their hands on your person, especially in these situations and scenarios. But unless they're doing that, you don't just engage, right? So other than that, the handler has to send the dog, which in 99.9% of the situations is going to only occur if they draw a weapon and they're out of reach, right? So if they're out of reach and they draw a weapon, at that point you have full justification in almost every state, with few exceptions, to send a dog into that environment. Other than that, it's going to be holding your dog back. Don't come any closer or my dog will bite. Stay back or you're going to get bit. And then if the person continues to approach, the dog will engage as they can reach the person. And
they know when it's real, right? They can smell it. Like they can smell the adrenaline and they know.
Yeah, that's my theory. So I'm careful with the dogs to not automatically assume that I know how they do everything. My mentor used to say that they have access to a world that we don't. Wow. And some people view that as they have access to a spiritual world and they can sense, different things in that realm with us. I do tend to think that a lot of it is scent, but I have seen them react in ways where scent wouldn't have worked in a situation, like where you have a tailwind. So it's coming from your back, blowing toward the person, which would blow all the scent away from you. And the dogs don't have any different reaction in those situations than they would if the wind was blowing toward us. But they can definitely sense aggression. I also tend to believe that the dogs are so in tune with the body language communication, because that's their primary form of communication, right? And when I do have clients that contact me and say, oh, my dog bit somebody or my dog bit another dog. And it's, these are clients not that have bought my dogs, but are wanting to train with me, right? Can you help me fix my dog? And they always say something like, it came out of nowhere. And I always tell them it never comes out of nowhere. There's always a sign that something was going on. It's probably been happening for 6 months and you've been ignoring it. And you've looked at it now as normal behavior from the dog, but the dog's been telling you for 6 months, I don't like this. I don't like this. And I'm not getting any communication from you. And then it finally hits a point where they go, I'm going to do something about it. And then the handler thinks it came out of nowhere. So the dogs are always communicating with us through that body language. They're communicating with each other through that body language. And I have a tendency to believe that they are much higher in tune than we could probably even imagine with our body language. And people will bring their dogs to come and train with us. And I will tell them, okay, tell your dog to cross this beam and then step over these other dogs on this table and then, go across this other beam to this other table over here. And they struggle and they're trying to drag their dog through and their lead is tight and all this other kind of stuff. And I go, let me show you how to do it. And they've been training with me for like 3 weeks, right? Their dog has been out there a few times, but still doesn't really have any clue who I am. And I can just take the lead and go, right here, let's go, cross this, do this, good job. And because of the communication with the lead and the body language communication, the dogs just do it. And then I hand the lead right back and they go right back into struggling. And I'm like, you just saw that your dog could do this. So stop dragging them through. Stop trying to force them to do it and communicate to them what you want them to do. And then allow them to read your body language and attempt to do what they think you're telling them. And then if they don't do it, it's probably because you're giving them confusing information. And so fix you. Because if the dog just did it for me, the problem is not the dog. The problem is you handling the dog. And so you need to figure out how to communicate clearly to the dog so that it does the thing it needs to do. And that body language is such a huge part of the communication. And like, I wouldn't do this here now because of liability issues in the US. But when we were training in Canada years back, every year, did I tell you guys this story last time? Every year, a military school would bring like 30 or 40 boys out, anywhere between the ages of like 8 to 10 up to 15 or 16. And we had this school bus that we would do what we call bus extraction. So back in the, mid 90s, the Israelis were having a lot of bus bombings. And so the guys that I was working with had been tasked to develop some bus extraction techniques to go in and get bombers off of buses. And so we had this school bus that we would train in. And we would load this bus up with kids. And then we'd put a bad guy in there with a training weapon. And he'd be, yelling, stay back or I'm going to kill somebody, blah, blah, blah. And we would tell the kids, see that dog out there? When that dog moves, I want you to start screaming and get off the bus any way you can. If you want to jump out a window, go for it. If you want to go out the front, you want to go out the emergency exit in the back, we don't care. Run across the top of the seats, but get off the bus as fast as you can. And we'd send the dog in. And sometimes if the door was open, a lot of times the dogs would go up the door. But if the door wasn't open, they'd jump up into the window of the bus. They'd dodge through all the kids, run either under the seats or on top of the seats or wherever they could get through. And they would always specifically target the guy that was the one showing aggression. And they would just completely ignore everybody else. And there's something to the body language that goes on, whether it's scent, whether it's some kind of access to, something we could call the spiritual realm, whether it's body language or a combination of all of them together. But they definitely have, I think, just a good general way of saying it is access to a world we don't have access to.
Got it. So if you got hit over the head and were unconscious, would the dog, once the dog's on attack with no recall, will the dog recall, or what would happen in that situation?
So, and that's it. So what our dogs are trained to do, and it's different trainers use different techniques, right? Our training technique is the dog brings the level of fight to the person that they bring. So essentially, once the person stops fighting, the dog, it doesn't mean that they'll totally disengage, but they bring the fight way down. And we'll run drills, and I'll remind me when we get there. I'll run a couple of these drills there for people to see. Where I'll get in the suit, and I'll stand out just like we're doing a deployment, and the person will send their dog, and I'll just stand there and do nothing. And the dogs run up. Every once in a while, they tag you lightly on the arm, but you're not doing anything. And they're just like, you're not doing anything. And then they kind of circle around you maybe, or they kind of step back and they watch you for a second, and then they just go back to their handler. They're like, he's not fighting. Like, there's no fight to be had here. So we're not doing anything. And, when you're talking police dogs and things like that, they want their dogs to engage people who aren't engaging. because a lot of their issues are people hiding, right? People refusing to come out of rooms or refusing to come out of vehicles. And so an apprehension dog grabs a hold regardless, and then they can direct the dog to pull the person to them. And because it creates pain when the dog pulls, the person comes with the dog to the handler. For personal protection dogs, we're not apprehending people. That's not the purpose of our dogs. The purpose of our dogs is to protect you from a threat. So when the threat is over, the dog disengages, or at least 99% disengages. You know, there are some dogs that'll kind of, they're almost like, come on, man, do something. Like they might like tag you a little bit and then step back and be like, are you going to do anything? And, but then after you just sit there for a couple of times, like when they bite me, if they do bite me at all, I go, ow, stop it. And they're like, that's weird. Okay, well, I guess there's no fight to be had, so I'm going back to my person.
So if one of these dogs got loose out in public, there's really no issue. Whereas a police dog, that's a different type of thing.
More and more it is. You know, it used to be that police dogs, they take them to schools and walk them around with the kids and all that kind of stuff, and there was never a concern. There's been a real lack of stability training in the police world, and I think it's really been detrimental. A lot of departments have shut down their canine sections because of that, because of liability and people getting injured. Orlando here has had, I can't remember the last numbers, but it was something like 6 early retirements 2 years ago of their officers because they were bitten so badly by their own canines, not the handlers, but another officer that was on scene, and they would deploy the dog to bite, and the dog would turn on a fellow officer and would injure them so badly that they had to be retired. And a lot of that is, there's people that are training dogs that have no idea what they're doing when they're training dogs, right? So there was a story that when the Romans defeated the Germanic tribes way back when Rome was, expanding out all of their empire, once they finally defeated the Germanic tribes, they had policies up in those areas where the soldiers could not move around in units smaller than squad size, smaller than like 12 people, because the dogs that had been trained by the military had no more handlers, right? They were all dead. And so they would pack up and they would roam around, and they had been trained not just to attack, but to target Roman uniforms. And so they would see Romans walking around in their uniforms and they would just go. And so they had to be in groups so they could defend against these 6, 8, 10, 12 dog packs. And law enforcement inadvertently does that all the time. And it drives me crazy to see. And the military guys, the military police, the Air Force SF guys, if you're on any of their channels, or their Instagrams where they're posting pictures, you see it all the time. A guy's wearing his military BDU pants, his issued, tan or brown or gray shirt, whatever their uniform requires, wearing a sleeve, taking bites off the dog. Or you see it in law enforcement agencies, they're wearing full uniform, wearing a sleeve, taking bites off the dog. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. You're training your dogs to attack fellow officers. That's what you're doing when you wear those uniforms and allow the dogs to bite uniforms. It should be exactly the opposite. Never bite someone wearing this uniform. And then, you can have, if you're in a gang-ridden area, you get, clothes that have the gang colors of the gangs that are prominent in your area. And you throw those things on over your uniform, and then you do your equipment. You can either do it under or over top of that clothing, and you work your training that way so that the dogs aren't targeting officers or targeting, fellow soldiers. The dogs learn, if I see a uniform, that means don't attack that person. That uniform pattern means they're friendlies. Anything else, that means fair game. So if you're going to go to, overseas and fight against another military, then you'd want to be deploying your dogs on guys wearing that military pattern uniform before you go. So the dogs are like, okay, got it. That uniform bad, this uniform good. And, you got to think about it from the dog's perspective of they think kind of like a 4-year-old. So they're highly capable, but they're very matter of fact. There is a thought process that goes into what they do, but you have to communicate at the level of a 4-year-old. Do this, don't do that. You can't say, which one would you like to do? Because they go, neither. I want to go do this thing over here that you don't want me to do. And as soon as you start giving that kind of freedom to them is when you start running into problems. And the more freedom you give with a dog that thrives on discipline, the more problems you create for yourself. But we take our dogs out in public all the time. almost every dog we'll be bringing out to your place. Almost anybody can pet. We could literally release them in a crowd of people and they'll just roam around. And the biggest hassle is like, okay, this person doesn't want you to pet them anymore. Stop like bumping his hands and saying, hey, you should pet them right now. And but any of those dogs at the same time, somebody turns into a threat and they just go, oh, bad guy, rip his arms off. And even when they do that, because of the way we train, it's not an emotional thing. So like literally we do bite work with the dogs and I could be beating the crap out of the dogs. I can get them pinned between something tight. I can be kneeing them into it, like bruising their ribs, smashing them on the head, jabbing them in the ribs with a training knife. And then the fight's over and I drop the sleeve and I get on my knees and I go, get over here, buddy. And he comes running over and he pet on him. Oh, you did a good job. That was a good fight. And so they know I fight when there's a fight. I don't fight when there's not a fight. Right. And so, you know, depending on how much they've been exposed to being out in public, sometimes they're a little nervous when they're in a big crowd, but that's just a matter of exposing the dog. So depending on training levels that people buy and things like that, more of that is done in the higher levels and a little bit less in the lower levels.
So like the real reason you're bringing a bunch of dogs to Self-Reliance Festival is so that they're in a big crowd and get used to it, right?
So I'll have one dog that's young that hasn't been, he was actually with me last year and did a really great job, but he's going to be one of my personal dogs that moves with me all the time. So he'll be new. And I have another dog that is a little bit older dog, but it's been mostly on our compound with us. She's one of our breeding females, but she's just an awesome dog. So we'll see how she does with people walking up to the table. If she does good, we'll walk around with her. Otherwise, we'll just keep her close with us. All the rest of the dogs that'll be with us are very comfortable and calm moving around in public with tons of different people. They're out in public every day with their people. And they're our dogs and been trained by us, but they're my trainer's personal dogs. So they go to work with them. They do everything that they do.
So those dogs back in Roman times, those were also attrition dogs, right? They were killing wounded on the battlefield.
Yep.
And that was part of their feed. They were eating those people. And then when they packed up, there was nobody feeding. Those dogs were eating those people.
Yep. So, well, like a lot of times, the things you don't hear about the stories of the Germanic tribes is they trained the shepherd-sized dogs. So the Germanic tribes were breeding what eventually became the German Shepherd generations before anything by the name of German Shepherd ever showed up, right? So they were using the Dutch Shepherd dogs, the Belgian Malinois dogs, which they weren't using breed names like that in most of these places, but they had those lines of dogs were being bred and crossbred to create that breed. And they would strap blades to their backs and train them to run underneath horses because horses weren't armored on their bellies. And so they could run under a galloping horse and slice their belly open. They had Danes, the Great Danes. Those dogs were originally bred to dehorse armored riders. So the reason they're so tall is because they could jump up, literally put their paws on the back of a horse, grab a rider by the arm or the head or wherever they got him and pull him off. So they don't really have a super powerful bite. When you take bites off them, German Shepherds bite harder, but they bite hard enough to grip and hold on. And then they would pull the person off the horse. And once an armored rider is off his horse, he's easy to kill. And
the hellhounds, the Irish, not the Irish, but the wolfhounds were like that too.
So, and what's so funny to me is in modern day, we have like 278 different training methods for everything, right? And even the use of the prong collars that we use, it's like back then they had none of these things. They had ropes. That was pretty much, ropes or some form of a primitive buckle. And that's the only tools they could use with the dogs. And they had dogs that were trained to run underneath horses with blades. They had dogs that were trained to engage fighters on the battlefield. They had dogs that would dehorse riders and hunt and do everything else that they wanted them to do with none of all these crazy, stupid techniques that we have. It's like we're compensating for our inability to communicate with the dogs anymore. We've largely lost that ability. And so we start bribing them with treats and toys, and we start using all these other methods to try and convince the dogs, please do this thing that I want you to do. And it's like, if we just got back to communicating with the dogs and building a bond with them, they would do pretty much whatever we asked them to do.
So here's a question related to that. My personal perception, when I was a kid, I would walk around and there would be dogs that people had out on leashes or whatnot.
Yep.
0% of the time was I afraid I was going to get bitten by that dog. Now, when I go out and I see a dog on a leash, I don't bring my dogs out on leashes because I'm afraid other dogs are going to attack them.
Yep.
Unless I know the area. So is it me, or has that changed, that there are just a lot more dogs that have not been trained or don't behave well in public?
My perception is this. We've got now a culture where there's very little accountability for your actions. And in the olden days, olden days meaning 80s and before, right?
That's what I mean.
So you would have one of two things happen if you were walking a dog down the street and it attacked somebody else's dog. Somebody would kick your ass, whether it was the person whose dog was just attacked, or they went home and told somebody else what happened, and they're showing up at your door and dragging you out and kicking your ass for having a dog that does that to people. Or the police were showing up and your dog was probably being put down and you might have been arrested depending on how badly things went, right? Nowadays, it's like everybody's answer is it's not my fault or it's not the dog's fault. And I may have told you guys the last time we were we go to Rock and Brews a lot right around the corner here after our training, and it's a dog friendly place. And so we bring a bunch of our dogs out there. This guy came in with a 2-year-old Rottweiler and he's barely holding on to the lead, right? It's a tight lead. And as he's walking through trying to get to his table, all he's doing is making excuses. Oh, I'm sorry. He's just a puppy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, see that 4-month-old dog right there, that Malinois? That's just a puppy. And it's laying there. It's not moving. It's being told to not move and to stay in its place. And it's doing exactly what it's told. There's no fucking excuse for your dog dragging you through. If you have no control over your dog like that, don't bring them into public. But we're in an environment where that's what people do, right? They go to Pet Stupid and they walk around with dogs they have no control over and end up getting other people's dogs bit. Or you go to, I love that Lowe's and Home Depot and places like that are, dog friendly because it's easy to take dogs there and it's a great training environment for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the people, every once in a while you get there and there's somebody that just has zero control over their dog, but they think it's a great idea to bring them out in public. And it's like, get some training in that dog first. And especially the males, depending on the breed that you're working with and stuff like that, if you wait till a dog is a year old before you start doing anything significant with it, at some point the dog gets frustrated in training, right? It's like, I want to do this thing and you keep telling me I can't, and I have to do this other thing that I don't want to do. Maybe if I bite you, I won't have to do that thing. And they test you. They go, rawr. Well, if they're a year old when they do that, you've got a fight on your hands and you have to win that fight. And you're probably getting bit in the process. Whereas if you start them off when they're 8 weeks old or 10 weeks old and they go, rawr, you go, knock it off, put them back on the table. And they're like, holy crap, that was traumatic. And the transition to, well, I'm 10 times that size now, even though they were like 20 pounds when that happened, and now they're 80 pounds, right? They're 4 times bigger. They still look at you like you can snatch them off the ground and tell them, knock that shit off. And they're like, okay, got it. Don't mess with my handler. And so at this point in our training, I don't even really help people solve those problems anymore. I'm like, I have these young guys that want to do that. Go to one of them because I'm over getting bit because you screwed your dog up. And, but it's just this environment where people have very little accountability. They have, they want to cast off all the responsibility onto somebody else. And so they get these dogs. They don't take any responsibility for the dog. Oh, I want it to be, just act like a dog. And I'm like, well, dogs are domesticated, right? They're not wild animals. So the proper way to be a dog is to have a job and do it, whatever that job is. Are you a hunting dog? Are you a companion dog? Are you a protection dog? Whatever that dog's job is, it should be doing its job so that it's in some form of obedience. It's whatever that job happens to be, right? And then if you do basic stuff with them, it doesn't have to be, ultra high end, crossing ladders and doing all this other crazy stuff. It just needs to be, when I tell you to leave something alone, you leave it alone. If I tell you to wait, in general, you'll wait and not go after something. You'll just listen to what you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do, be well-mannered in public, and that's all that's expected of you. And so many people have just, they totally ignore that in their lives.
Yeah. So Bob Lester asked, can you talk about personal versus protection versus property protection? And I would say, also, in addition to that, can that be the same animal? And also, Bob is coming from the position of Bob wants dogs to send to school with his kids because they cannot go to school armed. So that's a lot. I know I just threw a lot at you, but can you kind of speak to some of that?
So for children taking a dog to school, probably what you're going to need is a justification for a service dog.
Emotional support.
And I always recommend to people, go to the Department of Justice website, doj.gov, search for Americans with Disabilities Act service animals, and look. They have a list of, including but not limited to disorders that service dogs can be used for. And if most people go down that list, shockingly, you probably got something on that list, right? And then, and again, this needs to be legitimate. I don't encourage anybody to misuse this, but once you have that, you get a doctor's note and you get a dog that's trained for that, and you can be the one that does that training yourself. And the law specifically outlines that you can train your own service dog, and then they're good to go, right? So if you had a dog that was protection trained going into that environment, it would be extremely important to make sure that you have a very stable dog, one that's been exposed to a lot of children, especially children the ages of the children that you're going to be taking. And you need to make sure that your child is responsible enough to manage that dog. So, they're not hot-headed. They're not, out picking fights with other kids or anything like that. And that would be that situation. We don't do a lot of them anymore, but we used to work with charities that would place service dogs with tier 1 operators, guys that were in CAG or Dev Group, or that were out working with the, can't remember the Air Force unit that would work with a lot of those guys, the air traffic controller guys. And and so they would want service dogs that were protection trained. And so we did some of that, and you can have a very stable, very safe service dog that also has protection training in it. It does take extra work though to get to that level. When it comes to property protection dogs, a personal protection dog can certainly be trained on the perimeter of your property and be used in that purpose. I tend to think of the property protection specifically as either perimeter security dogs or guard dogs. And in those situations, you're not as concerned with stability because you're containing the dog somehow, either with a fence, a multiple perimeter fence setup like what you have there, or on some kind of a tether or a tie out where they can keep somebody from entering this doorway, but they can't really go anywhere else, right? And so if you don't belong in that doorway, don't go near it. Don't go near that dog, and you're safe. So, and that's what most people would think of as like a junkyard dog or something like that. Like those dogs' purpose was they would be chained up during the day when there were people there, and then at night they would let them loose to roam around. And whether they would actually bite or not, they were certainly protective over the area, right? They would at least bark and show some aggression and typically, hopefully, scare people off so they wouldn't want to go in and mess with the dogs. And there was some immoral things people would do to those dogs too, like feed them gunpowder and things like that to literally make them crazy, which I do not recommend at all. But it would create a dog that was literally losing its mind and would and often they would bite their people that they weren't supposed to because nitroglycerin messes with your brain chemistry. But so you can have like a perimeter security or a guard dog. When you are talking about protection dogs, my vision of a protection dog is its primary purpose is to move with you or a member of your family. And so if you're outside, then that dog's outside with you, right? If you're inside, that dog should probably be inside with you. And if you want to incorporate perimeter dogs and personal protection dogs together, that's easy to do. But if you have a dog, so your perimeter security dogs are susceptible to numerous threats that could render them unusable, right? So somebody can take a steak and soak it in antifreeze and throw it over the fence. And if you haven't poison proofed your dog, the dog eats a little bit of that steak and it dies. And it's a terrible way to die. Antifreeze is a terrible way to kill any animal.
How fast does it take that dog out of commission?
Very quickly. Yeah, within a couple minutes. And so there's actually, a lot of people in, urban areas and things like that would do that. They would, they'd scope out a place. There'd be a dog. They'd throw a steak over the fence. The dog would eat the steak. It would die. The people wouldn't understand what happened. Oh no, my dog died. I don't know what happened. And then a few days later, they'd get robbed, right? Because now there's no dog to contend with. So when your dog is out and about, it's susceptible to those types of situations. So if you had a large place like yours, I would not have the dogs at the far exterior fence. I would have them in like the secondary where you're just out of arm's throw from the primary fence.
Any problem mixing those dog teams?
Not with those. The only dogs I would separate, and I would probably use, good fencing for this, some kind of chain link or something like that, is you've got your livestock guardian and your other dogs, right? And you can acclimate those dogs together. You start off at a distance, and you have somebody move that dog around, and you're near the livestock guardian dog, and it's like, hey, there's something over there, and you easy, it's okay, he's fine, right? And you communicate to the dog, and as the dog becomes comfortable with the other dogs at that distance, you move the distance. I'm moving my hand, but you can't see it. Closer together, and until they're right on either side of the fence, and the livestock guardian dog has realized, oh, this dog isn't coming in here to mess with my chickens or my sheep or whatever it's protecting. And so it doesn't necessarily view that dog as part of the pack, but it knows it's not a threat. And so it kind of comes off the threat radar. So that's a little bit of a process. But then once you have that set up on your ground, especially if you're getting all your dogs from the same place, they've probably been acclimated together at some point anyway when they were younger. And one of the drills that we do with a lot of our dogs, we actually have been posting these on our social media. We got a lot of people like, why do you do this drill? This doesn't make any sense. So we'll have 20 or so dogs at our classes, and we have these tables that we all lined up together. So they're like 3 or 4 tables long. We put all the dogs on the tables, and they're literally like right next to each other. There's very little space in between them. And but there's a spot at the far end of the table, and the dog that's on the opposite end from that gets up and walks over all the dogs and then lays down on that end of the table. And then we slide all the dogs. So we're training the dogs to stay in position. Let me move you around. We slide all the dogs down, and then the dog at the end walks over until everybody's gone through the whole cycle, right? So all the dogs are getting stepped over. They're getting stepped on a lot of times. The dogs that are really comfortable with it and have done it a lot will step in between, right? But a lot of the dogs haven't done these drills very often. So they're stepping on top of them, or they're a little stressed. So they're like, that looks like an empty spot right there. They want to jump over 3 or 4 dogs, and then they land clumsily. And so there's a lot of dynamic going on with that situation, and all the dogs are to leave it alone. And every once in a while, you'll have a dog go "Rrr, rrr," or something like that when it gets stepped on. But we deal with those situations. And after running those drills for a couple of weeks, they're like, okay, got it. Like sometimes I get stepped on. Sometimes I'm in uncomfortable positions. Sometimes I'm next to dogs I'm not really familiar with, but they're not doing anything, so I can't do anything. And because all of our dogs go through that training to some degree, when you have dogs that have one task and dogs that have another task, they don't care about each other. In fact, sometimes your biggest problem is if you come out with your personal protection dog and just let them loose, they want to run and play. So it's like, nope, we're not playing right now. You're over here. You guys are over there. It's not game time. Now, if you want to let them have some playtime together, that's okay. But the more you start allowing that stuff, the more they're going to want to default to that rather than be with you. So you'll never be sorry having more discipline in your dogs than less.
How many can you bring in 2 fresh dogs to the same household at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, if you want 2 dogs, 2 protection dogs, it's often best to do that, because in the process of training, you can actually start deploying them together younger. And so they're used to, so the first time you deploy 2 dogs together is dangerous if they've never deployed together before, right? And there's a lot of times when we're like, all right, you stand there, you stand there, everybody's close, leads are on the dogs in case we need to come and get them, and I'm in the suit and send them, and we're going to see what happens. And, if I have a new person there, they're like, isn't this dangerous? And I'm like, yep, training protection dogs is dangerous. Welcome to my world. And I have scars all over my hands and legs because I get bit all the time. And it's usually dogs finding weak spots in my suit or me doing something stupid when my wife tells me not to. Like, you should put the bite pants on for that dog. Nah, it'll be okay. I'm just going to throw the jacket on and take bites. And a dog that's never bit legs before goes, ooh, those look good, and tags me. And I'm like, son of a, and she's like, I told you. And I'm like, it's going to be a good scar though. So, but if we start them when they're young, working together and deploying together, then they always look at each other like, oh, great, my buddy's here to help me in the fight. And they never look at each other like, what are you doing here? Because fighting a human is extremely high stress. And you can take dogs that will fight each other and go, okay, now fight me. And they're like, because a human is a much higher pinnacle predator than the dog is. The human is higher on the predator list than the dog. So if a dog has a choice between fighting another dog and fighting a person, if they haven't gotten to the stress level where the person is no longer that high a level of stress to fight with, they'll default to the dog. right? They're like, okay, I'm supposed to fight something. I'd rather fight that dog than fight that human. So I'm going to go tag the dog. And so you have to get the dogs over that if they're already older. And there's ways that we do that. We control how far one dog can come and the other dog that doesn't worry. And then we can keep them apart, but they get used to seeing each other in the fight. And then we can slowly give them more and more access to each other until they're like, oh, okay, I guess we fight beside each other. But starting them as pups is your ideal, because then if one sees a threat, the other one just looks at that dog going for a threat and goes, well, I guess we're going for the threat. Like they don't have to both see the exact, they will just feed off each other. And the one downside you can run into sometimes is one of my trainers, you'll see, he says all the time, they got one brain. Right? 2 dogs, 1 brain. So if you're trying to do one thing with one dog and one thing with the other dog, you want to kind of maintain a little bit of that training when you're doing your handling. Like, don't just open your car door and say, load up, and have them both load all the time at the same time. Go, you wait, you load. Good load. Okay, now you load. And then the next time you switch it up, right? And just little things like that so that they learn, oh, like sometimes he's told to do something different than me. Sometimes I'm told to do something different than him. Because the more you start doing everything the same all the time, they don't wait for your command. They see the other dog do the thing, and they just assume that's what they're supposed to do too.
Yeah, we're in the middle of integrating livestock guardian dogs here, which may make you wince inside knowing the dog problem I had earlier this year. But I have not allowed the LGDs to even see that I have dogs at this point. Mm-hmm. So because I'm afraid, I think we can orient them not to kill my dogs, but I don't want them not to kill other dogs. And so I want to make sure when that happens that the integration is these particular animals belong here and other canines must be annihilated. Because what I've heard is a lot of people accidentally teach the LGDs, coyotes kill, dogs don't kill, and then stray dogs come through and kill your sheep.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard my joke there. I said, go get a rescue and just send it into the livestock guardian. You go, there you go. All right, now you know what to do. Now these dogs are okay. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I would never do that. But
yeah. So how old are your livestock guardian dogs?
8 months.
So yeah, I'd probably about a year. Make sure that they are in a situation where they can't get to your dogs, because you'd never want the interaction to happen in the first place, right? Once it's happened, it's a problem to fix. So I would, even if you set up tethers, and those little screw in the ground things probably aren't going to work. You need like a heavy duty tether on a tree, right? And you just go out and kind of love on them and then clip them and make sure you have good solid collars. And so they're tethered, and then bring your dogs out and just put them in a position where the other dogs can see them, because as soon as they see them, they're going to start barking and becoming reactive. And then leave those dogs there, whether they're tethered in their position or not. And then go tell your livestock guardian dogs, these dogs are okay. If you wait till you get your first kill, then you'll know that they know what to do, and then you can start introducing them. Yeah. It's kind of there's benefits and drawbacks both ways, right? You can introduce them early when the threat is lower, the threat of failure is lower, but then, like you said, then you're always concerned until you get that first confirmed, okay, they took out a predator, kind of a thing. If you have really well-bred dogs, and even in the livestock guardian dog world, this is becoming more and more of a problem, because people just go, Great Pyrenees look cool, I'm going to breed them together. And they breed and don't maintain the trait that is the livestock guardian dog, which is it bonds to animals and not to humans. And then you run into potential problems. But if they're well-bred, it's probably not going to be a problem. But it's always one of those things that you never know until you know. Yeah. And, so confirming that they're good, and then you can set it up 2 different ways. You can have the area where the livestock guardian dogs and the livestock are, and that area is just an area that the other dogs never go, right? And then when they happen to be close to the area where the first set of dogs are allowed, but the livestock guardian dogs are also nearby, then you can do your introductions there, assuming you put your proper safety precautions in place.
Yeah.
And so that would be my recommendation. Chain link fences are good. Barbed wire, they'll go right through. Any of the electric fences, depending on the dog, they can easily clear 6 and 8 foot fences.
Yeah.
Malinois, if you teach them how, can clear 12-foot fences pretty easily. So, if they haven't ever figured out that they can do it, then it's probably not a problem.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's always one of those things where you want to proceed cautiously.
We have the strength of electric fence that bites hard.
Yeah.
And so at this time they're half Pyrenees, half Anatolians, and they respect that fence a lot at this time, but they know when it's off. They figured out if it's not ticking, it's not a problem. So
And if there's another dog, a lot of times a dog will go straight through that electro netting or electro fence to get to the other side where that dog is. Once they're through it, you're not going to retain them after that once that happens.
Yeah. It's
Do
one of those. If you have a
those dogs live with the sheep. They're inside with the sheep all the time.
Yep.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, no, they don't. They're outside with the sheep all the time. In fact, I'd like to find some.
But they're in the pen with the sheep all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, we don't. I mean, I don't know how I'll ever get into the vet right now.
Why?
Loading them in the car, I don't think will be very easy.
So if you start,
because I inherited dogs that didn't know how to sit. They do know how to sit now. The anxiety of the car, they're just definitely afraid of it.
Man, those dogs. If those dogs are livestock guardian dogs,
yeah,
you're not going to have any problem with it. Like we have these dogs like within 30 minutes on leash, no problem.
Yeah. I've got one on a leash. The other one's timid. I mean, I'm working on that right now over there with the sheep a little bit. But it's been an interesting thing because it's a completely different training experience than what I've been doing with my dogs in the family environment, right?
Are you feeding them with the sheep?
Yes.
So one of the things you can try to start doing is when you have them over nearby where your vehicles are going to be, is bring the food out where they can see it, and then walk over. And especially if you have like a SUV or anything like that with a section in the back where they can jump up and have a place to walk around.
Yeah.
Put the food up there and encourage them to jump in and eat it there, and at least get them used to getting in and out of the vehicle. And then even if you had to use the food to draw them into it when and if you had to take them to the vet. Yeah. Because I can see most of those dogs are pretty healthy in terms of not needing to go in for, regular checkups and things. But if they got in a fight with a coyote and they're tore up and need to be, stitched back together, then that could be a potential problem at that point. But if you have them where they're used to getting in and out of the vehicle, then you'll minimize some of that anxiety.
What about sedating them?
What?
What about sedating them?
Yeah, I'm sure that could be done too. I mean, they have been treated by a mobile vet since the time they were born, just from a examination and vaccination standpoint for the dogs. So she's the one who hooked me up with the dogs, and they've already killed a coyote.
Those 2 8-month-olds killed a coyote?
Yes, before I got them, not on my property yet. So we know they know what to do with that. And the minute I heard that, I was like, yeah, so our dogs are way over here and those dogs are way over on the other property. And I'm not walking the dogs by there until we know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The one nice thing about livestock guardian dogs as a general rule, and of course you have to make sure that this applies to your set, is they generally don't want to leave the herd.
Yeah.
So they'll stay with the herd and bark and show, they'll posture up. And then if the threat comes in, then they'll attack and kill it. Mm-hmm. So if they're at a distance, they will probably bark and like react to the presence of the dogs. But the chances of them leaving the herd, especially once they're well bonded to it, are fairly low.
Yeah.
The biggest thing with livestock guardian dogs is just, for me, I got to remember those aren't pets, right? When she comes to the gate and she's so cute and I want to pet her, I'm like, no, right? The only interaction we have is, here's food. Yeah. Now go do your thing. And there's a lot of times lately, Hera, our younger female, she's, I think, 65 pounds now, and I think she's 14, 15 weeks old, 16 weeks old maybe. We'll see a dead rabbit laying in the grass, right? And I'm like, what the hell? That's a really big rabbit. It's her. She's laying in the grass, just laying, right? Looking out from where the sheep are, but she's always very close to the sheep now.
Very nice.
Oh, that's cool. So she took to the sheep right away?
She did take to the sheep, but the other two dogs, they still put a beating on her. Like I killed a rabbit today and just set it on the ground to see if she would come and if she was going to take it and try to run off or if she'd leave it till I said something. And as soon as she came to that rabbit, man, out of nowhere, one of the Pyrenees just came out, and I mean, just teeth out, snarling, and they still there's a hole in her ear from months ago. Like, hey, you can't do that. Those other dogs train that new puppy.
Yep. Yeah. When you have a good pack, the pack will teach the other dogs what to do. People ask me sometimes, should I get another dog before my dog dies or wait till after my dog dies? Because they'll have an older dog and they're wondering when to get another dog. And I'll let them know, does the dog that you have now, is it in your mind, is it like the perfect dog? It does everything you want it to do. It doesn't chew things up. It behaves how you want it to behave in the house. If they're like, yes, it's like, I love how my dog acts right now. I'm like, then get another dog before that dog dies and let that dog teach your new dog how to behave. If you hate your dog right now and you're just waiting for it to die, then probably wait till it dies and then get another dog so you can train it up. But your training speed, I mean, we accelerate the training of our pups so fast by just bringing out older dogs. And, when we're teaching puppies to walk across beams, you bring out an older dog and walk it all the way around the course. And they sit and watch it walk around the course. And then at least they know what to do. They may still have to figure out how to get their back legs where they're supposed to be and all that kind of stuff. But they understand, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to walk across that thing when he tells me to. And then it's just a matter of teaching them the agility to not miss a step and fall off. But they pick up from the other dogs so much faster. When we're doing bite work with puppies, one of the very best things to do is bring that puppy's mother out when the pup's like 8 weeks old. So it still very much knows who its mom is. It was just nursing a couple days ago, and it's on a lead with a handler, and you put the mama on a tie out, and you let her bite one arm, and you agitate those pups with the other arms, and they'll look at you, and they'll look at her, and they'll look at you, and they'll look at her, and then all of a sudden they go, rah, 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 rah. And it's like, there you go, you got it. And they just come into it so much faster when they see that.
Okay, so we've got a bit of a backlog of dog questions. And what I know about dog questions is dog questions beget dog questions. Yes. So before we dive into those, Joel, I've noticed that your social media presence has exploded in the last couple of months. Like, what is that about? It looks like you have sort of a new focus. Tell us about that and how that's going, why you've made the choices you have.
So, I listen to you guys a lot. I've been listening more to Tim Toolman, and of course I've listened to Jack for years and years. And one of the things Tim mentioned a while back was he said he was doing his podcast as a creative outlet, right? And I'm like, why have I been feeling the need to do something a little bit more on the creative side, at least from my perspective? And the other day it kind of hit me. I was like, I came into the dog world from the philosophical perspective, from this is why we do the things that we do. Now here's how we do them. And the how is so incredibly simple that most people are like, that doesn't work. And I'm like, do it. And it works. And they're like, what? It's that easy? I'm like, it's that easy, but you have to think properly about it to even understand that that's the thing to do, right? If you overcomplicate, I did a podcast called Overcomplicating Simple Issues and Oversimplifying Complex Issues, right? And we do that all the time in our life. We take super complex issues and we simplify them down to a couple things, like when people talk about dogs, prey drive and defense drive and things like that. I'm like, that's a very simple way to talk about very complex issues in the dog. And so I was like, I need some place to kind of share the part of the process that's the philosophy without making people bored, right? So I was like, every evening I can do a 3-minute video on different ways to think properly about life that also apply to the dogs. And it gets people to kind of know who I am a little better and not always just seeing a picture of a dog or a deployment or something like that. And then my wife has really helped me. So she pretty much stopped doing training when we're out doing training. And she's out there with both our phones on battery packs so the batteries don't die. And she just records everything. And it's like one video sideways, one video up and down, one video sideways, one video up and down. So I can use them on whichever kind of thing I'm doing. And then every day or so, we just do a big dump from her phone to my phone on AirDrop and then get that stuff set up. I think, John, you were the one pushing TikTok. And I'm like, no, that's dumb. I'm not going to do it. Look at all the stupid stuff on here.
Hey, I TikToked you this week.
Yeah, and finally I saw that picture. We were laughing so hysterically. We were actually at my mom's when I saw it. And so Wendy, my wife, showed it to her. And she was like, what? You're way bigger than that. Like, they should draw you bigger. I said, well, if I was actually in that situation in the apocalypse, I probably would be that thin from not having very much to eat. But yeah, that was awesome. So yeah, we've been doing a lot more there, and I've also gotten into, some people say you shouldn't do this, but I'm like, well, I don't have time to do it any differently. So I just pretty much share whatever I'm doing on all the platforms. And I've kind of got a process down now where in the morning I wake up and one of the very first things I do is I get on Instagram and I go and I try to save things as drafts. So in the evening when I'm sitting down right before I do my my one little video for the evening, I go through and I try and create 2 or 3 or 4 drafts on each of the platforms so that in the morning when I'm sleepy, I don't have to think about what to say or anything. I just post that one. And so I can go through and do TikTok, all 3 of our Instagram pages, which we have the Fortress Canine Puppies, and Canine Academy. And then I can jump over to YouTube if there's something I'm supposed to post over there, jump into MeWe and post on MeWe. And then in terms of what I do regularly, that's kind of it at this point. But it lets me have a morning post and an afternoon post just about every day, unless I have my kids with me, in which case I spend more time with them. And then as soon as they head back to their mom, I jump on it again. So yeah, that's been what we've been doing there. And I tell people this and they don't believe me, but until about a year or a year and a half ago, I never spent 1 penny on advertising. I did Facebook and Instagram, which I'm banned from Facebook right now. So I got to rebuild all my accounts and everything if I'm going to use that anymore. But I did Facebook and Instagram for years, and the new clients would come from there, and then they would tell their friends about it, and then their friends would come and buy dogs. And that was the only advertising I did. And, of course, having the website. So some people would find it doing a Google search or whatever. But that's all I did. And what I found is trying to stay as close as you can to a consistent time, plus or minus an hour, whether it's morning or evening, and then doing it every single day. Is the followers, I don't have some giant following or anything, but every day I have 2 to 5 more new followers. Mm-hmm. And just doing that consistently over time builds up the audience. And of course, on the puppy side, there's more. Probably that's my biggest one. I have about 7,500 people over there because people love pictures of puppies. But then, I'll post a puppy wearing a prong collar, and they're like, "Oh no, the prong!" And I'm like, "Ban all these people. You guys don't ban them. Don't ban them. And,
don't ban them. So stop sharing it. Post first to Instagram. Figure out your hashtags. That's going to be your most important part of it, right? You're going to use hashtag canine puppy, protection dog, GSD, Malinois, right? Find all of those. Get on a computer if you need to. Get on Instagram. Put all those hashtags in. See how many times they've been used, right? Because people subscribe to those hashtags. Right. So author your post in Instagram, and then don't share it somewhere else. Take it somewhere else, post it, but you've already copy pasted, so you're just going to plug the same verbiage in there. There is also an app you can get. It's $15 a month that will go to all of your social media platforms, and it will post each one organically.
Awesome. What's that called?
I'll tell you offline what it is.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I tried to use Hootsuite for a while, but I was just not happy with the interface, and multiple times a week I'd get, we failed to post this. I'm like, then what am I paying you for? I already uploaded it. Get it done.
15-second clips. 8 to 13 is the sweet spot on TikTok. You can go longer on Instagram. Everything's going to be reels. You don't have to put the sound. If you do it with the sound, you'll catch more people. But when they copyright that sound, when the copyright catches up, you will have no audible to any of your posts. So you can still do reels without that. Also, using the templates on reels will get you a lot more eyeballs also. Typically, you're going to use a song with that, though. Also, take that same post on the same platform of Instagram and share that into the story, and pick the piece of that story at 15 seconds that looks the best and populate that, because people will scroll through there. While you're doing that, put those shorts and those stories also on YouTube.
Okay, nice. So what's the limit on a YouTube short? Do you know how long that has to be?
It'll tell you. I think it's 30 seconds or 15. It'll tell you.
Okay. So it'll be something that is the same thing I used on an Instagram story. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm always one of these guys that waits until like I resist it as long as I can when they say use Reels on Instagram, and I'm like, no, I like using the posts. And they're like, but we'll show more people if you use Reels. And then I finally give in and use Reels, and it's like I start getting 2 or 3 times as many new followers each day as I was getting before. And YouTube's like, use Shorts, and I'm like, but my video is not short. Like, it's this long. This is how long it is.
You can still put up. I still make normal posts on Instagram and get tons of traffic. Always make your post as a question, right?
Okay.
Would you rather have a puppy? Would you rather have a dog? Do you like red? Do you like blue? And put that in first, because you will get people to interact with you. You can also do polls on your stories. Put polls in. Would you rather have a Malinois? Would you rather have a Belgian? Whatever, because people will interact. You need the interaction. You need them because when they click, it propagates more. It's going to show it to more people also.
Yep. I notice whenever I do get one comment and I reply, and then there's another reply to that, and back and forth, those always get seen 2 or 3 times as much as the one.
I'll tell you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I got fact checked on Facebook today from the Self-Reliance page. I've had more interactions on that post than any post I put up all week. Just because I'm blurred out. So now I'm like, I should just start spreading false information on purpose just to get blurred out.
Exactly. Don't go too far overboard, but just enough that they're
just enough
questionable.
My friend Alyssa was running my social media for a month. She's like, hey, just let me do this for a month. I want to see how much I can grow this. And she was putting up just, hey, it's a picture of a fucking cup of ice. She's like, you like crushed ice or do you like ice cubes? And like every 3 hours she would post, and the traffic was through the roof. So they would see the real shit from the bullshit.
Right.
But because of it, that's what was bringing it.
Yeah. And if I had something that would do that scheduling, like you mentioned, I would I get 1 day a week where I can really focus on admin. And so if I had that on the laptop and I could just sit and go boom, 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 boom for the next 2 weeks, and then hey, just in the next 2 weeks, I got to sit down and do another 2 weeks worth, and just constantly stay ahead of it. That would definitely streamline things on my end.
You're going to eventually get to the point where that's a job.
Yeah.
So you're going to come in 1 day a week and make content, and you're going to have a person that takes that content and does all that other stuff.
Yep, and puts it together.
You're going to have you'll get there, and you're going to have to pay that. And the more you pay that person, the better that person's going to be, right? But when you have branded merchandise like those eyeballs getting out there, people will buy your collar, they'll buy your lead, they'll buy your shirt, they'll buy your hat, right? They'll buy your calm or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, and we're just now getting into that. Like my wife got the press. We were trying to order shirts again. We've done 3 or 4 runs of shirts, and it got to the point where nobody will even respond anymore. They're so busy making other stuff. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get you to reprint an old print that I already had. Like, you've already got it.
So you got to use a bigger guy.
Okay.
You got to use a bigger guy. It's going to cost a couple dollars. It's not an $8 shirt. It's a 10 or it's a 12, but they retail for 25, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to use it. You can't use the guy in the garage, because the guy in the garage gets over. Even my guy is super overwhelmed. You're going to have to go to a dude. Like, there's a company in Franklin called Twine. It's a warehouse as big as mine, and all they do is print shirts for major label shirts, right? But they'll react to you.
Yeah, the guys that I'm reaching out to are like the grunt style. I reached out to them, and they're like, yeah, we'll do custom shirts for you. I reach out with more information, ghosts. There's a guy called Combat Iron Apparel. I love his shirts. He did this set of shirts here for me, and but I reach out, and if I do hear back, it's like a week later, and then I send the information, and then it's like 2 weeks before I get a reply, and then it's 3 months before the shirts come in. I think they're just so busy. Yeah. I love the product. It's just if you want to do something for Veterans Day, you got to start it in January, or you won't get it in time.
Yeah, you got to calendar all your shit 6 months out. Mm-hmm. I thought Grunt Style and 9-Line both. I thought if they print somebody else, they still brand it with their own shit on there.
I'm not sure. I actually told the guy with Combat Iron Apparel, I said, put your logo on it. That's fine with me. Doesn't bother me at all. But he did it on the first run, and then he stopped after that. So we went to our little flag with the dog paw on it. But my wife found a place online where you can order, you design your own print, and then they send you 100 of them. They run about $2.50 to $3 a print, and then you heat press them right on. And she just made a bunch of shirts for us that way. I don't know that they're quite as high a quality as you'll get from the full-on screen printing, but my thought process on those is I have like 6 or 8 designs I'd like to do. And with as long as it's been taking to get even one design, I'm like, okay, if we just order the 6 different designs, then we can put them all up on the website. And then you only make a few of them, and then we just make them as the orders come in.
Yeah, that way you don't have all those blanks sitting around already printed, and you just use those blanks for those designs. You can totally do that. You could also go higher end and become an apparel company for the canine industry and get a DTG, a direct to garment printer, which is a printer that sits on the tabletop and prints your shirts. Like a printer.
I think down the road, we're looking at a couple things like that. The next big thing on our plate, which I think I mentioned to you, Nicole, before we started, is I've had about 6 or 8 young guys. Well, one of my big things in the dog world is the dog world's super toxic, right?
All of it is.
Yeah, everybody hates everybody. If you don't do it my way, you're doing it wrong, kind of a thing. And so I've had these young guys, and they're like, probably between 20 and 30 years old. Either they've been trying to run a business for a little while, or they're trying to get started, and they reach out and kind of ask some questions. So I was just, helping them out as they would send questions in and stuff. And one of the guys that's my client came out this weekend, and he runs like it's like a men's club where, he helps you, learn how to be a man again, right? Kind of a thing. And he's got all these guys, and they paid like $10,000 for this course that he does for however many weeks that he does it. And it's like a 1 day a week call on a Zoom call, and then some training or whatever online. And he was like, "Are you doing anything like that on Canine Academy?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "You should totally do it." So me and my wife have been going crazy brainstorming that idea now. And we're going to set up a canine coaching course on our Canine Academy, where these young guys or anybody who's running a business and wants to get a little bit more into that can sign up. It covers everything from designing your logo and your name and getting your website and all the basic stuff of actually running a business. And then it also includes 5 days of actually training and learning the techniques that we use. And then you can take that and run with it with a 1 day a week Zoom call on it. And so one of my thoughts, and this may be a pipe dream, is I think the toxicity comes largely, and this may be the same in your industry too, because most people doing dog training businesses are barely scraping by, right? They're spending all their time doing it. Their wife has to work another job for them to survive, or whoever their spouse is. And, it's essentially a hobby that barely, makes any money. And so if anybody they view everybody as a competitor. And if anybody leaves, oh no, like everything's falling apart. And I'm like, I kick people out all the time. I'm like, nope, you don't belong here anymore. Go, bye. Or, people want to buy a dog, and I'm like, nope, you're weird, not selling you a dog. Like, they'll just say something that triggers that I'm not selling this person a dog. They're going to go use it for something they shouldn't, and then that's going to come back on me. And I was telling my one trainer guy today, I said, it's funny because I don't view anybody even locally as competition. Like, they do their thing and I do my thing. Like, I don't do sports. So if somebody says I want to do sport training, I'm like, go to that guy over there. He does sports. Like, I've never trained with him, but he does sports. If you want to do sports, go over there and train with him. And so I think if we help people have businesses that actually make money, they're less concerned with the competition, because I've looked at, like, comes back to the poverty versus abundance mindsets a lot. But I'm like, there are so many people in the country that want dogs and want training. And I get questions all the time. Do you know anybody in Pennsylvania? Do you know anybody in Maine? Do you know anybody in Washington State? And I'm like, if we start building this community of trainers that all kind of went through this program together, we can list their companies on a page and say, find a trainer local to you, and have a list, either categorized by state or whatever, of people that we actually have interacted with and that we have a relationship with, and maybe start building some of that back into the dog community.
I was going to say the same thing, man. And the toxicity, I was literally going to say you should do the membership levels. You'll find, too, that just doing private videos on YouTube, you can have a subscription just for private, where you can say some more open things. And then you can also have access, right? You'll find that you could stay 100% busy and not even have people come to you for 5 days. But if they do come train with you for 5 days, they're going to have a more intimate relationship with you, and they're going to take that out there. And everybody's contagious, right? So they're going to catch something from you, and then they're going to, pass that on to somebody else. But the toxic shit comes from, it's the crabs in the bucket. That nobody's above them helping pull them up, so they want to pull you down. And it's not about, it's about bringing you down to their level because they don't want to work hard enough to achieve what you've already worked to achieve. Yeah. And that's the biggest part of it, man. Just stand out through being the best. Yeah. And don't even address them.
Yeah. It's so funny because most of the negative comments we do get on our training and stuff like that is some other trainer, supposedly, that's what their handle at least portrays them as. And you're like, how do you even have time to come over to my channel and waste your time writing? And they won't just write one post, right? They'll write a post, and then my clients or people that follow me already, they answer it for me. I don't even have to say anything. But then they'll do like these long replies. And I'm like, how are you in business? Like, what are you doing? You're wasting time on somebody else's page, doing something that has no benefit to you and just wasting time. But the engagement's there and I get more posts. And the few times I've had posts go viral, it's because it gets shared over on a sport dog page somewhere. And people will lose their freaking minds. Oh, you're not doing it right. And, the first time it happened, I was like, oh no, got to control it. No, this is bad stuff. And then I realized, wait a minute, I just got 500 new followers from that one post. So then I start egging them on, like, come on, guys, tell me how much I'm doing wrong. And then they won't respond when you actually call the trolls out in the beginning. But yeah, it's a fascinating world.
So since you have had a renewed focus on your attempt to expand your online market share, how much have you grown, would you say, in reach?
Well, like, I don't have a huge amount of people following every day. It went from like probably 1 to 3 every couple of days to about 2 to 5 a day.
Okay.
Which to me, like, I don't know how you look at it, John, but when I'm trying to sell stuff, I'm not trying to sell 1,000 trained dogs a year. I can't train 1,000 dogs a year at the quality that I demand for the dogs to go out. I want to sell 20 dogs a year. And like, I'd want to sell 1,000 Canine Academy memberships, a day. That'd be great. But that's the only one of my businesses that's really scalable that way. I'm never going to breed 500 dogs a year, no matter whether I had the demand for it or not, because I'm not a puppy mill. I breed for my protection program and we sell the excess puppies. And so we make a decent amount of money off that every year, but I don't breed to sell puppies. I breed for my training program and then we sell the excess puppies. So I'm in a funny situation where I don't want 10,000 customers on the dog sale side. I want, 50 good customers a year. And so even though I have a fairly small following, when I post, if I do have a bigger than expected litter, and so I have 1 or 2 available puppies that I didn't expect to have available for sale, and I put those up, within a couple weeks, those dogs are sold. And like, I've never had a puppy stay on ground that I wanted to sell, and I've never dropped my prices for it. And most of the time I'm like, well, we've got everything reserved out for the next year. I guess our puppy prices just went up $500 a pop. And somebody will contact me and be like, what? They just went up? But they were just $2,500. I'm like, you should have got your reservation in because they ain't $2,500 anymore. And it just kind of like, they're still $2,500 now. But when we went from 2,000 to 2,500, people would get all upset. And I'm like, that's the price. If the demand is up there, the demand is up there. And I don't register my dogs. My dogs aren't registered with the AKC because the AKC destroys everything they register. And people are like, well, do you health test them? I'm like, I have a genetic health guarantee. And guess how many times I've had dogs returned to me for genetic problems? 0 times. That's why I can have a guarantee. Because if I had unhealthy dogs and I had a guarantee, I'd go bankrupt. Right. So I test them occasionally to make sure that nothing's creeping into the lines. But I don't need to do a health test on every single litter because my litters are healthy. My breeding practice is solid. So, and then people jump on and be like, well, then you're a backyard breeder. I'm like, yeah, I have a $250,000 facility and I'm a backyard breeder. But okay, if it makes you feel better to get your dogs that are health tested and then still break down and get sick, I guess go for it. But it's just the reputation over time. It stands out on its own.
It's internet bullshit. I mean, there's something real to it. Obviously, that, but people saying that for the most part, they just saw everybody else in the group they're in say the same shit. Yeah. It's just something they don't even know what it means.
It's almost like another form of that mass psychosis.
It is. Where,
like, the people in my group say this, so this must be true. And they never research it for themselves. And I mean, I understand that because when I was in college, I felt the same way. You know, I had things that I thought were right, and I would argue to the death over them because it was just fun to argue with people. And then you grow up and you realize, hang on a minute, maybe I wasn't 100% right there. And if I wasn't 100% right there, maybe I'm not right in other places too. So now when people present things that are opposed to what I currently believe, it's more like, well, tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way? Like, you know, well, how would you respond to this question? And how would you respond to that question? And more teasing out the information. And sometimes you find out they're full of shit. And other times you're like, I haven't thought about it that way before. That gives me something to think about. And if more people would approach things that way, I think, number one, we'd actually be able to talk to each other again, right? Especially in the political discourse. And then overall, I think we would all grow. I haven't done a podcast on this in a while, but I used to say, if you're wrong about something important in your life, don't you want to know it?
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, I want to know. I don't want to go for the next 5 years thinking A when A is wrong and it's really C. I want to know as soon as possible if I'm wrong about something so that I can think properly about it or I can do the proper thing. But people tend to really resist that. It's like, I spent 5 years doing this, so if I'm wrong, I wasted 5 years. Well, you still learned a crap ton of other stuff. Like, don't worry about the one little thing. Like, just modify slightly on your course and keep going.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got friends who are left-leaning who got a pretty heavy dose of TRS, TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So I don't know if you've noticed, Donald Trump is not currently the president.
Exactly.
They still, like, I posted today about, you know, like a stupid meme that had pictures of people on a homestead saying this is anarchy, and another picture says this is not anarchy. And it's, you know, guys dressed in black vandalizing things.
Yep.
And he started like meme spamming my comments, all these anti-Trump like crazy things. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? And I realized he's still in TDS because he's afraid Trump's going to get elected again.
Well, Trump is going to get elected again, but Trump is more important to them right now than he was then.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The one thing you can say about Trump, like I'm with Jack, I hate all politicians, but the one thing you can say about him is he's a master marketer. Like, he knows how to hit the hot button topics, and he knows that negative publicity is just as valuable as positive publicity. And he doesn't care which direction it goes. He just wants people talking about it. And at the end of the day, like, I don't know if he'll run again or not. It seems like he's certainly leaning in that direction. But it's just fascinating to watch. You know, my general policy is I'm not going to deliberately create the negative publicity, but I don't care if it just pops up from time to time. But I've seen guys build whole businesses just on the negative side of things.
I use hashtag MAGA and Make America Great Again probably once a week because it does spike. Because both groups come in.
Yeah.
And then they fight.
Yep. And then you get all the benefit of the traffic on your post.
It's like those little clips we make of the Jeep truck stuff. I don't hate Jeep trucks. I do it because the Toyota 4Runner guys come in and fight with the Jeep guys.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay. We're going to go some questions here. What is a good starter dog? Very little experience.
Well, when people are asking what kind of dog to get, my recommendation is, what do you want to do with your dog? Right? Do you want to hunt? Do you want just a companion dog? Do you want a dog for protection? And make your decision based on that. If you're looking at some form of protection dog, my recommendation would probably be a well-bred German Shepherd, which are extremely hard to find. Most of the German Shepherd's breeds are broken, or the German Shepherd's dogs and the lines have been inbred via the AKC breeding practices for many years. But if you can find a well-bred German Shepherd, they are more of the mellow of the three breeds of the Dutch Shepherd, German Shepherd, and Malinois. And so they're a lot easier to handle. And regardless of which dog you get one young. So try and get a puppy 8 weeks if possible, and then get training right off the bat. Don't wait for that dog to be older. Start training them. Some trainers want you to wait till 12 weeks. We start ours at 6 weeks sometimes. As long as we put prongs on them often that young, but we don't use them until they stop responding to a flat collar. And then once they stop responding to a flat collar, we switch over to the prong. And as you're working that way, just once you have a baseline of obedience in your dog, you'll be so much happier with your dog the rest of its life. And it really doesn't matter what breed you're getting. But if you're looking for a hunting dog, then you're going to want something like a Labrador or a Pointer if you're doing birds or things like that. So a lot of people select a dog based on what it looks like. And then they're like, why am I having all these problems? I'm like, because you have a Mauler breed, and that's what Mauler breeds do, or whatever it is. And they're like, but the pit bull looked cute. And I'm like, it's a hunting dog. That's what it's supposed to do. And so a lot of people don't understand the behaviors of the dog. So pick out what you want to do with your dog first. Find a breed that does that generally or does well at that. And then, generally my recommendation is stay away from anything that has AKC papers. That's not 100% across the board, but it's a good rule of thumb. And that also does make it harder to find, because then you can get into true backyard breeders who have like a brother-sister pair and they're breeding them together just because they want to make a couple $100. And so that can be problematic. But if you're starting off, find a decent breeder, find a breed that that will do the thing that you want to do with your dog, and then go that route.
Tell them what the issue. Yeah, there it is, Nicole.
So can you elaborate on how AKC is a problem that this like fits perfectly with what you just said?
So our philosophy when I was coming up, I was taught by my mentor that every breed was created from other breeds, right? No breed just spontaneously popped up. And in order to maintain the strength and vitality of a breed, you have to, from time to time, reintroduce the breeds, or at least some of the breeds that were used to create the breed originally in the first place. And the AKC takes the opposite approach. They say the only way you can have a German Shepherd is to breed German Shepherds to German Shepherds for at least 6 generations, and then you can call it a purebred, quote unquote, purebred German Shepherd. And then you have to keep doing that to maintain the lines. And only then do you have actual German Shepherds that can be papered with the AKC and are supposedly purebred. And what happens is you'll get a dog from South America and you'll get a dog from, Virginia, and you'll do the genetic test on those dogs. And the genetic test comes back and says they're brother and sister. Mm-hmm. Now, they're not actually brother and sister, but the genetics are so in line. I mean, it's like, think of, the jokes about Southerners and inbreeding. They have a family stick. They don't have a family tree. And it's like that when you start doing that to the breed. So we follow the old breeding practice of you cross the lines into one another every so many generations, and then you cross back out. You think about, for anybody who follows Jack, and he was talking about breeding the chickens and getting the large breeds on your first hybrid cross, you get that over and over and over again when you continue to cross properly and back out, run a generation, then cross properly and back out. You end up with that kind of hybrid vigor compounded on top of itself. And so that's one of the problems. And then the other problem in the AKC is you're relying on, so here's how the AKC registration works. You have 2 dogs that you're going to breed together, but really you have 4 dogs on ground, right? And you're going to breed female A to male B. And accidentally, male D jumps in and breeds, and he's a crap dog. You didn't mean to breed him. But you know that if you say he was bred to male B, it's worth more because the lineage or whatever. And so on the paperwork, you say, no, it was male B and female A that bred together. And then in the lineage, that's what it says. So you're relying on the people who are doing the breeding to be honest. And I can tell you, they are not honest. They're interested in one thing, and that's how much money can I sell these dogs for? And the AKC is all about creating like these, there's always these rewards and ribbons and, ooh, best in class here. And, ooh, you got this award over here. And then the people that are breeding those dogs, they stack those awards up and they say, look at all the awards my dog has. They're $5,000 a puppy. And all they want is that next little award or that next level in whatever the little competition they're doing is, so that they can charge more for their puppies. And you get a lot of dishonesty. Now, people are caught. They do try to police it, but you have to maintain a book. But all you have to do is put the different information in the book that lines up with the paperwork that you put in, and there's nothing they can do to confirm or deny that you're putting misinformation in there. So those 2 things combined, really all you have to do is type in whatever breed you're interested in, type in that breed 1920 images. Yeah. And look at some of those images, and then go, that breed, best in class 2020. And then look at those images and say, that's the result of AKC breeding. Do I want an AKC dog or not? And that'll answer. If you look at that and you still want an AKC dog, get one. But you can see that the breeds are destroyed when you look at them that way.
Okay, from K-Bonk. Malamal he snaps jaws during ball play near the hand. Overexcitement, question mark.
Yeah, so that's not an uncommon thing, but I correct it pretty early on. So essentially, we talked about stability earlier. My process is you don't put your mouth on anything that I didn't give you permission to put your mouth on. So sometimes I give my dogs permission to bite my hands. Like when they're little pups, I'll play with them and they'll start to get a little mouthy, and I'll kind of hook their little canines with my finger, and I'll give them a little tugs, and I'm teaching them to deal with the tension and the torque on their teeth, right? So that they're not turned off by it when they bite something and have to pull and they feel that tension. But even when I'm doing that, I do it for a couple seconds and then I freeze and I go out. And if they don't let go, I give them a little correction. Fooey that out. They let go. Good out. Praise them. Pet them up. And then maybe I use a stuffed animal and I play with the stuffed animal and move it around. They get all excited. They bite it. I do a little tug with them. I stop moving. Don't keep. The thing is, a lot of people keep moving when they're doing this, and it keeps the dog's drive increasing, right? You stop moving it, out. As soon as they out, good out. You do that a few times, and especially when they get corrected a couple times for not outing, you pause and you say out. They let go immediately, right? And then, because what will happen is the play will increase until they can actually hurt you with it. And then you'll get hurt. And then you'll be like, what's wrong with my dog? It's not your dog. It's you. So you allowed that behavior to continue. And it's one thing when it's an adult. It's another thing when it's your kid, right? And then your kid, has a sore finger from a dog, and they think the dog bit them because it was just overexcited. And now they're scared of the dog. So my recommendation is get it under control early. It is an overexcitement thing, but one of the reasons our dogs, I describe our Malinois as working dogs with an off switch, they don't have an off switch because there's some unique thing to Malinois. They have an off switch because they have discipline. And when I say lay there and don't move, they know lay there and don't move. And they'll lay there all day if I tell them to. And that's the off switch. The off switch is the discipline, not that they don't get overexcited sometimes. It's when they do start to get overexcited, I say seats. And they go, oh, got it. I'm not supposed to do this thing that I'm getting overexcited about. I'm supposed to sit, leave it, plutz, foos with me, whatever the command is that you want them to do, you give them a thing to do. And then if they don't do it, they get a correction so that they have respect for the command and they go, okay, got it. When I get overexcited and you tell me to do a thing, I stop what I'm doing and I do that thing. And if you start that younger, then older, you will be much more happy.
Okay, this one comes from earlier in the episode, and it's GB is asking, is this similar to Schutzhund training?
Okay, so Schutzen is among the sports, right? So when I talk about sports training, it's Schutzen, KNPV, IPO. They're similar, but not the same. So people that are into sports are like, but we're different. Okay, I know. They all have their little variations. But in general, all of those sports were created from one of two things or a combination of both. It's either confirmation for law enforcement use, confirmation for military use, or a combination. And they have a very different application to a personal protection dog. They're often doing apprehension. A lot of the military dogs, depending on what they're using them for, they don't care whether they're stable or not, meaning they don't care if they bite when they're not supposed to, right? When you're doing protection training, well, it's similar in the sense that a dog is biting in both cases, right? But in most of your sports, they want what they call a full mouth bite. So the person's arm is here. They want the dog to use its entire mouth, go all the way back to the molars, bite, and then typically they want them to drive into the bite as they're biting, right? Why do they drive into the bite? Because it causes less damage. It doesn't create more. It hurts, but it doesn't create more damage because law enforcement agencies get sued when there's too much damage. So they want pain for compliance, but minimal damage. They're also an apprehension dog. So their purpose is to go catch, bite the person, hold them in place so that the slower police officer can catch up and then put handcuffs on them, right? If you're dealing with a personal protection dog, my philosophy is the dog's job is to end a threat to me or my family as quickly as possible. How do you end a threat quickly? Violently. That's how you end a threat quickly. But if you want it to be violent, the person goes oh shit, I want this to stop right now. And then you can end it like that. Out, let's go. Dog is back at your side. Then you take control of the situation. Get on the ground. Don't look at me. Turn around. Put your feet in the air. Let me see the palms of your hands. Whatever you're going to do, right? And you should practice that all mentally before you actually have to use it, or you'll just be like, I don't know what to do. Let's go. But whatever you're going to do, and there's every situation is different. So you can't just say this is what you always do. But our dogs, they bite with their canines because the dogs are called canines for a reason, because they have 4 long teeth called canines, and they use them. So our dogs bite with their canines and then thrash and then retarget and thrash and retarget and thrash. And it's usually not in one spot, right? It's in one arm and you're like, they're biting me. You go to hit them, boom, they hit the other arm, right? You draw a weapon, stab them, boom, they hit the arm. And so once you render forearms inoperable, the threat of a human goes down by about 95%. Because now I can't choke you, I can't hold a weapon, I can't hurt you nearly to the degree, like if you're a Muay Thai fighter, maybe you can still use your legs and knees, but most guys that are attacking you aren't Muay Thai fighters. So you end the threat as quickly as possible. Once the person realizes nothing I do to this dog is stopping this fight, then they just start going, get him off, make it stop fighting the dog and I'll call him off. Out, let's go. And then now we take control of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, so next question. Oh, did you have more?
No, that's just the difference between the sport world and the protection world.
Chuck Peoples wants to know, are your dog's commands trained in Czech or German or what language? And I'm letting my dog out while you answer this.
So largely German, but we kind of mix in a little bit of English in there. So when we were choosing our commands, and when I say when my mentor chose commands, they wanted commands that had a sharp ending sound to them because it gets a sharper response from the dog. So for instance, the German command for wait is bleib with a B, but B is kind of a soft sound. So we use bleib with a P. So it's bleib. And the hand signal is bleib, wait, and walk away, right? And so we use seat, plutz, bleib. But then when we recall our dogs, we use let's go. We use Fuß, which is German for my heel, be at my side. And so we kind of have a little bit of a mix of both. When you get one of our dogs, we give you a sheet that has our list of commands that the dogs have been trained in. But it's easy. Like if you're used to a certain set of commands, it's very easy to convert a dog to a new set of commands because the lead direction is going to be the same. The gestures are going to be the same. The only thing that's different is the thing that you're saying. And of the 3 forms of communication, verbal, gestures, and lead, the one that's the least important to the dog is the verbals. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like 10% of your communication. So if everything about your lead and your body language says jump up on this table, but you say wait, they're not waiting. They're jumping on that table. Or if everything about your body says wait, but you want to jump on a table, they're not jumping on the table, they're waiting. So your verbals have a little bit of impact, but your gestures and your lead direction are way more important. So switching the verbals is fairly easy if you want a new set of commands.
That's good to know. Okay. What traits define awesome dogs to you from K-Bonk?
So the things I look for, I want dogs that can think and reason through problems. So we present problems to them and they have to solve problems. I want dogs that are physically strong. So not only is the structure of their body good and they can physically do the things they need to, but also they're healthy and they live a long time. And then I want dogs that can deal with stress. And honestly, the stress one is the hardest one to find. Whenever we're trying to add new dogs into our lines, 90% of the dogs that fail out are failing out because they can't deal with stress. So we put the dogs under stress and they just shut down. Right now, everybody shuts down under some level of stress, but you have to have a certain amount of stress threshold to work with so that you can start doing that stress inoculation training where if you're not familiar with that, this is where you shut down, right? This is your baseline down here. We raise your stress level just below, and then we drop it back down. We raise it up, and we drop it back down. After 5 or 6 times of that, we come up here, and we find that your new stress ceiling is way up here. And so now I can increase your stress level. And then we just keep building that on the dogs. If the difference is that much and not that much, it's almost impossible to work with those dogs. They call them nervy dogs in a lot of the breeders and things like that. We'll say dogs like that is nervy.
I think I know a nervy dog. Bob Lester says, if you have multiple dogs, I think he means protection dogs, can you only take one dog when the whole family travels as one unit, or can you bring more than one?
Well, that really just depends on how you handle things logistically. We used to move with 2 dogs all the time as a family. I had one dog that was my dog, one dog that was my ex-wife's dog. And so if I would go, I would take my dog with me, and the dog that was the family dog always stayed home with her, right? When we would travel as a family, both dogs would come. Things to keep in mind if you're traveling with dogs is if you're staying in hotels, are you going to be able to be with the dog the whole time you're there, or you got to leave them in a hotel and go and then come back like you're at a convention or something, right? You have to leave the dog in the hotel room. If you're going to have to do that, you need to make sure you train the dog not to bark and whine and carry on in the crate while you're gone, especially in a new environment, which can be a little bit challenging. You got to figure out what you're going to do with them while you're in the vehicle. Like I'm bringing 4 or 5 dogs up when I come up to you guys' place. So we're going to have 4 crates in the truck and then 1 dog loose in the truck, right? Could I have them all loose in the truck? Sure, I could, but we're bringing lots of food and other things too. Do I want to be constantly looking in the rearview mirror? Knock it off, leave that alone. So no, so they go in crates. They get out to use the bathroom every couple of gas stops, and they're perfectly fine because all our dogs are well crate trained. So it's a lot of the logistics. The more dogs you add, the more logistics there are. Like you stop for the night, we're in an RV, so when we drive a multi-day trip, we just pull into a gas station, usually a truck stop, for the night. Well, if I've got 5 dogs, I got to have a place to put all 5 dogs so they can use the bathroom and eat and get a drink before they go back into their crates for the night. And so finding places with like a line of trees is really nice. I can park my truck and my RV right along the line of trees, clip them all to a tree, come and give them their food and water and let them chill out for a while we sit out there with them. If you have 1 dog, that's a lot easier. Come with me to use the bathroom, come back, get in the car, and we can go about our business. So really the question of multiple dogs is just, if you're going to travel with them, are you willing to deal with the logistics that come along with that?
And every dog, it's not like 2 dogs is 2 dogs worth of logistics. It's like 3 dogs worth of logistics to bring 2 dogs. It seems like the more you have, the harder.
And it depends on how you're set up too, right? So like when I bring 4 crates, I'm actually taking the back bench out of my truck. So I'm going to have 2 crates pushed in, and then I have to take the other 2 crates out, put those 2 dogs in, slide the next 2 crates in, and put those dogs in. So every time dogs come out, and I've got an RV attached to the back, so I've got something on my hitch, I have to pull 2 crates out, which means I can't be catty cornered. I got to be perfectly straight, open those back doors. So it's just all those little things, right? And 2 is 1 step. You jump to 3 or more, and it kind of, it's not linear, it's exponential. It gets more and more difficult the more dogs you have.
Okay. Do you implement firearm inoculation and personal protection training?
So on the personal protection dogs, no. So our personal protection dogs, what we try to do with those dogs is, I can't find anybody in the industry that sells a protection dog for $20,000. That's our personal protection dog level. All the protection dogs in the industry are significantly more than that. And what I was trying to do is create a dog that the average person could get if they wanted to, using a payment plan. And what is not included in that is so they go out in public, meaning they go to restaurants with us and they lay at our feet while our servers move around and do stuff. And they get exposure to our classes. So our classes, they bring all their dogs in. It's all the people that attend our classes, but they do not walk around in the store. They do not go into really crowded places, any of that kind of stuff. So if you want to move with your dog that way, you have to do that. The reason we don't do that on personal protection dogs is it takes a long time. I could bring 10 dogs out on my obstacle course, put them up on tables and work one after the other, after the other, after the other. And in a couple of hours, I can work all my dogs on obstacles. When I take dogs into public, I take 1 or 2 dogs. I got to leave my diesel truck running, burning diesel fuel to keep the AC on. The whole time I'm in training the 1 dog, I work 1 dog, and then I come back and I get the other one and I work 1 dog, right? So the amount of time dedicated to each dog goes up substantially. So that's why our family protection dogs that get that training and up they're essentially twice as much. But they get all of that extra exposure, and they get all the scenario training of the attack on handler, the vehicle attacks, the home invasion training, and all that kind of stuff.
It makes sense. All right, John, what do you got?
I've asked my questions. Joel just keeps saying stuff I didn't even know to ask. So
that's kind of how that goes with Joel. Yeah, so I'm excited to be able to sit with you at Self-Reliance Festival in person. I hope we get a little bit more time to talk this time. I'm soliciting MC help so that I'm not MC the whole time everywhere.
What's your wife's name?
Wendy.
Whitney. Okay, so not Tracy.
No,
Wendy.
She's actually one of our clients. She lives a couple hours away from us, so she doesn't get down here every week. But she's trained with us for a couple years.
Awesome.
Do you have people that just come year after year after year to keep training?
Yeah, so we recommend. So I've made it where it's not a contractual requirement, but your warranty is based on it. So what we recommend is the first year you come quarterly for follow-ups. Because what I found is 3 months is when I start getting the calls of my dog is doing this. What do I do? And what happens is people take their dogs home. They let 90% of their discipline go. And what they don't realize is you don't see the results of that for about 3 months.
Yeah.
And about 3 months, your dog has come down. It keeps going, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to do that anymore, until it meets the discipline level that you've given it now. And now you're down here where he's eating couches, right? And so I really, like, you know, I've had other clients when I was working up in Canada where they're like, the dog ate my couch. I'm like, yeah, that's because you have to keep them in a crate when you just get them. They don't know who you are, new environment. You leave them loose in an office. They're going to do naughty things. So we recommend quarterly training the first year, and we can keep ahead of any of those problems that are happening. Semi-annual the second year, and then annual follow-ups are recommended just because fighting for a dog is the same as fighting for a human. It's a perishable skill, not so much in the knowledge of what to do, but in the stress category. So if you build a stress threshold that's really high, and then you don't go to any stressful situations for a year or two, and then all of a sudden you're thrust back into it, it's still not as low as it was probably before you started training, right? But it's much lower than it would have been if you'd have continued putting yourself in stressful situations. And dogs get the same physiological reactions to stress as we do. They get auditory exclusion, they get tunnel vision, they get fast motion time, slow motion time, all of that kind of stuff. And so the more stress reactions they're having, the more you're having to deal with that in a fight. And one of those is auditory exclusion. So you're calling your dog off. And this is where I see the biggest drop off is on the out command, because they do not hear you. It's not that they're being disobedient. It's that their ears have shut down because they're focused on the threat. And so you ideally don't want to have to go in near the person to retrieve your dog. So maintaining that at least every year, then you at least are exposing them every year to another 2 to 3 days of high stress training and keeping them sharp in those areas.
So that's just like when we train for our own self-defense.
Yep.
If you don't get your butt back to tactical response on the regular, then you're gonna start losing some of those skills that you've built up there in that mindset. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because the dogs have an adrenaline dump just like humans do.
Yep. They get that adrenaline, and you'll see it on the young pups when they finish one of their first like real high stress things. They'll go over, they'll just lay down and crash, and they'll actually sometimes even get the little twitches. I don't know if you guys have ever had a big adrenaline dump, but I'm always like after a fight or a close to situation where there was about to be a fight, I'm like, oh great, here it freaking comes, adrenaline dump. Like I just need to sit down, take some deep breaths for a minute, and let this pass through my system so I can move on with life.
Oh, I cry. I'll deal with the crisis, then I'll cry.
Yeah.
And then people are like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing now.
It's over. Get it out of my system. Yep.
Yeah. That's just the way it is. It's good to know that about yourself, though, so that it's like, okay, I'm going to deal with this after effect, too. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I had that was a bike accident, and I'm like, what is wrong with my body? My whole body was shaking uncontrollably.
Yeah.
And then going into the military, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Okay, now I can just train myself to deal with it. Now it's just like rapid heart rate, and like if I talk, I have to take a lot of extra breaths in talking. So in class, if we end up with an aggressive dog and I have to string the dog up, and he's like, no, you're not stringing me up, and we end up in a fight. Afterwards, I'm like, here's your dog back. Do this. Okay, now everybody give me like 2 minutes to catch my breath, and we'll continue on with class.
Yeah. Does that happen very often?
Not nearly so much anymore. Like nowadays, when one of my first questions when new people want to come is, do you have any aggression issues with your dog? And if they say yes, I say, you have to do private training with me before you can come to any of our classes, and it's $500 an hour. And if they say yes, I always go, damn it, I should have made it $1,000 an hour, because I don't want to get paid $500 an hour to work with you. I don't want you to come and me have to deal with you and your aggression issues that you already created. I should have been with a long time ago. But but some people will still take advantage of it. They're like, nope, I'm committed to my dog and I'll do it. And sometimes it's actually an aggression issue, and sometimes they just don't understand what's going on communication wise, and it's really not that big a deal. So it all depends.
That makes sense. Awesome. Well, let's go once around. It looks like the questions have stopped. So, Joel, talk to us about Joel things.
Well, we're doing the coaching program coming up. That'll be live on canineacademy.us pretty soon. You can check us out at canineacademy.us for our online training. You can
Is that K9?
Yes, letter K number 9 on all of my things. And I can send you a text with I've got a slide that I just copy and paste for my social media stuff. But we have puppies at fortresscanine.com/puppies. You can see our information for getting pups. We have a Malinois litter coming up that does have a couple puppies available on the reservation. Our Dutch Shepherds are usually sold out at least a litter in advance. So those are like a 8 to 12 month wait time or more. And then Fortress Canine for our trained dogs. We're getting ready to have a brand new website launch. I followed up with him and said, hey, just want to see how it's going. And he's like, you never sent me this information. I'm like, crap, hang on, let me get to that. Write up some stuff that I've let go. But so that should be launching pretty soon. That's exciting. We're on Instagram. We are on TikTok, MeWe. I'm occasionally on Float, and I'm trying to get back onto Facebook. But honestly, it's not high priority because I never got a lot of my traffic through there. Ran more of our paid ads for Canine Academy on there, which it was helpful for Canine Academy, but I've never noticed a benefit on the Fortress Canine side. And then we're on YouTube at you can just search for Fortress Canine rather on YouTube, and that's where I post all my nightly motivationals. My podcast goes up there, and you can find our podcast at Protection Dog Podcast.
And if you want to see Joel in person and check out his dogs and all the stuff that he can do and ask him all of your detailed questions about your dogs, he's going to be at the Self-Reliance Festival October 1st and 2nd. You'll be hanging out Friday before at the Plant Guild class, though, won't you?
Yes, we're planning to be there. I'm thinking now probably about on Wednesday.
Yeah.
We'll be able to get in and kind of get out of the way and all that kind of stuff. So that as other things are coming in, we're not trying to maneuver a big RV. We have to drop a dog off in between, but that's just going to be a one-day stop. Here's your dog, a little bit of training. They've already got another one of our dogs, so we don't need to spend a lot of time there. And then we'll be on to you guys. So as soon as we have the RV set, we'll be jumping in and helping you guys with whatever you need to get things set up. And then we'll be around for anybody who wants to chat.
Sweet. That's when I'm going to get to talk to you, is before the event.
Exactly.
That's the best time to talk.
And
John,
I'm a whiskey drinker too, so we'll have some whiskeys and sit around.
Some whiskeys and some conversations. All right, John, what do you got?
You guys coming on Saturday, Sunday to Self-Reliance Festival. Even if you have no interest in swales and planting and installations, it's worth paying the money to come to that Friday, because all of these guys will be here. Everybody that's coming in to present on Saturday and Sunday, you will get a chance to talk to them in a much smaller crowd, and we all hang out that evening and just bullshit. So it's worth paying that price of admission to have access to those people. I do a live video almost every night at 9 o'clock. It's much like this. We can talk about whatever you want. We put a new shirt out every week. This says G.I. Joe. It's a play on G.I. Joe. Knowing is half the battle. On the back, it says extreme violence is the other half. That's the shirt this week. We put videos on YouTube every single day, between 3 and 5 of them. We have a private membership. We put 3 private member videos up every week. You guys ask questions, we answer them, and we can kind of have a conversation in private that can't be the same conversation that happens in the public. So you can check that out. I'm on everywhere, literally. Anywhere you are, I'm on there as SOE Tactical Gear. So you can find us.
And I love those membership videos. I signed up for that, and you take however long it takes to go through the questions when you open those questions up for everybody, and everybody's questions get answered, and it's really great. I just set my phone down and put my AirPods in and go clean kennels or listen to the video.
We did a 3-hour video last week. We broke it into 6 30-minute videos.
Yep. That was a good move. All right, guys. I'm Nicole Sauce from the Living Free in Tennessee podcast. You can catch my audio podcast at livingfreeintennessee.com, or just look for Living Free in Tennessee on any podcatcher. If you are not on fountain.fm yet and you like podcasts, though, check that out. That's fountain, like drinking fountain.fm. You get paid to listen to podcasts there, little tiny micro payments, and you can tip people. One of the things I love about that app is I now when people tip me, they put a comment with it, and I see what parts of the conversation most resonate, which then helps me make better podcasts later. So from a content creator, it's great. I think it's also important to support a lot of these decentralized solutions to big tech, because if big tech gets googly and decides to fact check you on Facebook and blur out your meme for the day, that can hurt, or it can help, but it can hurt too. And if we're already using and comfortable with these other technologies, we're good to go. Plus, we know from supply side stuff, centralized planning of supply chains is very efficient, but is not very resilient when it comes to dealing with crises in the system. And that's the same with centralized tech, right? One problem and everything's down. Every time Amazon servers goes down, like it's like everything goes down, right? What if we weren't dependent on that one thing, and instead we were dependent to a small degree on hundreds of millions of things? Then when one thing goes down, we don't care. So that's just really important to me, and I thought I'd talk about that at the end of today's show. Also, Self-Reliance Festival, October 1st and 2nd, coming so fast. Grab your tickets, guys. And the day before, Friday, September 30th, is a Plant Guild class run by Billy Bond and Michelle Bond. It's going to be fabulous. They're going to talk to us about plant guilds, how to plant trees. We're going to plant one of John's swales, and we'll be serving you lunch. I just actually reached out to Melissa White to get her to do that. So we're going to have a couple different meal options this time. Anyway, that's everything I've got, guys. Thanks for joining the live stream. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks so much.